offer questions if they have them, but it could also just be a comment or a response in any other form. And if maybe when you say, if you ask a question, if you say who you are, that'd be helpful. So, anybody have a question? That surprises me. Oh yeah, Miriam.
I was really bothered, Valerie, by your use of the word minded. Because it's really important to me, because my mother used to say to me all the time, stop mindering me, she would say. My mother came from Manchester, but I grew up over the Pennines. And I think what you said was really powerful. I felt completely bothered by what you were saying. You're making us really think emotionally about how hard it is to be in the academy and not seen as who we are, and as women from working class northern backgrounds. And I didn't do it deliberately, but I did lose my northern accent. But I can talk about you.
I'm posh.
Yeah, I know, but it's how I grew up, and I think what you said was so powerful. I felt really moved by your questioning of our invisibleness in the academy and how that affects us emotionally, and how it is, as you said, a provocation to keep on writing and working, even if we don't have to, like you're doing today. So thank you. I thought it was really powerful.
Do you want me to? Thanks very much, Miriam. I mean, I tried, and we tried, to keep questioning a position that elides, in other words, sticks working class to you as a badge, as an identity, only. And I don't want to go there, because it's clearly ludicrous. Because if even my middle class children in London say to me, oh, can you stop talking sociology? They can't get what I'm saying to them. Then sure as eggs is eggs, my parents couldn't get what I didn't say to them, because I minimised, as Louise's lovely phrase has it. So I'm not claiming that identity as essential, personal, although it clearly is all those. It's not only that. What I'm really interested in is an identification, the politics of identification, when you use it and what purpose do you put it to. Now, I had this chapter read by these two younger scholars, and I didn't know what it had said in quite the way they saw it. I mean, they attribute to me something pretty fine, and I didn't write it in that self-conscious way. Because one of the things I'm particularly interested in is the unconscious at work in theorising. Literally, the autobiography, the question, cutting right across conscious theory in a book, usually written by a man, but actually in my history, I did read feminist literature. That was my intellectual formation. I was lucky enough to do an MA in Women's Studies. I'm wandering around here. I'll come into land. I'll probably leave it there, because I just think that that's really what I want to say. But I think it's really difficult to define yourself as an academic, as working class, for very obvious reasons. Equally, you're invisible. I'm wearing purple. I didn't want to be invisible, I think. Even in this chapter, I didn't want to be invisible. I think that shows on what younger scholars have taken from it.
Questions or thoughts or opinions?
I thought, my mum talked about being knighted as well, and I was always knightering her. I mean, there's so much to say. Sorry, my name's Valerie Walker-Dine. There's so much to say. it's difficult to know where to start, but I really loved seeing that Boddington's advert again. I thought that, but I also remembered Lorraine Chase and Luton Airport. Because, for younger people, this was an ad where somebody said, "Have you come from paradise?" or something like that, and she says, "Oh no, Luton Airport." And so. But I was thinking about when you were all talking about that and the issues about an underclass and what a respectable working class meant now, and speaking back, and it made me think about the role of deindustrialisation, because certainly the Boddington's advert was at a time when, you know, a northern working class could claim something and not shame. So I wondered if you could say a little more about how deindustrialisation and figured in your thinking, if it figured at all, and the impacts of that on the production of a different sense of what it means to be classified.
Yeah, I think this is something that...
Can you hear Sarah? Yeah. Yeah. Good.
I think this is something that me and Valerie have talked a lot about, and I think especially when I talked about how I found these kind of sociological accounts of working class communities so powerfully seductive, I guess, when I started reading them, was that they were a historied account of working class communities that actually I hadn't experienced at all. And I think as my research was specifically looking at that intersection of class and housing through looking at council estates, the processes by which someone gets located on a council estate now is completely different due to deindustrialisation, but then also due to shifts in housing policies. And I think that's, I guess, something that I'm interested in, and when I was trying to talk about to claim to be working class is always a claim to power, because I think that often it's positioned as a claim to oppression. And I think that especially now, it's particularly important to highlight that to claim to be working class, it requires particular powers that. Yeah, I think it's a more difficult identity claim to make. I think that's what mine is. Yeah. But I think in terms of because something that we were interested in talking, because again, I guess the three of us speaking to each other, we were talking about working class across time, with me and Valerie perhaps talking about working class communities that are very different, but then also whether we should now be talking to Daniel, and something that we really felt that we failed to capture in our talk due to time, was whether we need to be talking about a global precariat or a global working class. So that process of deindustrialisation or the outsourcing of industrial labour, what does that mean for class identities, is something that we discussed but we failed to put in.
Oh, sorry. Daniel's written about this. We've done a lot of writing and exchanging, and sometimes, you know, it will arrive. You know, clearly, I'm not going to speak for you in that case now. Okay. But there are different geographies, different places, different times, different generations, amongst many other differences here. And, you know, one of the pleasures of our discussion that hasn't probably transmitted is just learning, my learning about things, and colleagues hopefully learning from each other, because Daniel comes from Chile and Sarah literally round the corner, and so how we re-enter discussions about class or sensitive to those shifts in history is a really important political challenge, not least because of the point Daniel made about the the demonisation of the working class all too easy to accomplish with the Brexit result and other things going on.
Here, here.
Maybe I would like to add, but something different, just something that came up in my head now. It is that I was wondering, what is the purpose of bringing to the actual press and writing a book like 20 years ago, right? And just I was thinking that if we think about it as something with nostalgia, not with melancholia, which is something that is already dead, but something with nostalgia, in the sense that by nostalgia we can revitalize some history and bringing back that history into the present and push those history into the future to rethink ourselves. And even though it is difficult now, more difficult than before, I think so, to identify, let's say, with working class people, because it's more precarious, less kind of graspable in many ways, I think that we can trace an attitude, or a kind of, I don't know how to put, but yeah, but an attitude that we can trace from that time till nowadays, and we can feel, that's what I feel now, that is still pervade our own subjectivities and ways of feeling. So it's not dead, you know, that's what I say, yeah.
We've got time probably, I still don't have a hand up. If you don't manage to ask anything now, we've got plenty of time throughout the day, but we do need to make sure we have time for the next one. So is that all right?
Yeah. First of all, I wanted to say thank you to all three of you. Really powerful and fascinating, and scribbling notes. And I'm just thinking about that question of the idea of a global working class or a global precariat, and I thought I really welcomed what you said about kind of site in terms of location and movement across sites. And I think partly it was a kind of brief tangent, but I know for me a real experience as a middle class Glaswegian moving to the south of England was that people that in my middle class milieu in Glasgow would have been seen as being incredibly posh were describing themselves as middle class in a southeast England context, and that was a real shock for me. I kept coming up against, but that's not middle class. That's not what middle class looks like. And I guess thinking in those terms and thinking about some of the cross-national research we've done between the minority and majority world, where the most affluent families that we've studied have far more in common between India and the UK than the families living in relative poverty, because relative poverty is so different. I guess it made me wonder whether we don't turn our kind of critical lens of thinking about class onto elites enough. You know, if we've got 1% of the population now at 50% of the wealth, and that 1% is really not studied. And I just, thinking in terms of your theorisation, I just wanted to ask for your reflections on that.
Well, luckily we actually went to a and I don't know if anyone is here who was, but Valerie was also kind of chairing one of the sessions on a seminar, or a symposium, I guess, on the study of elites. And that was really, and we all went to it, and it was really interesting to think about that. And I think that it did raise some questions for me, because there were points at which I felt uncomfortable with this attention perhaps going to this group, and I was trying to work out what that was, and I think that it was because they became studied in isolation as within an elite bubble, and I felt like the only kind of motivator that I could imagine for studying elites would be to understand then how their eliteness is oppressing an other. But then what that made me think was, then do I do that when I'm studying the other end of the class spectrum? And so it was a real challenge for me to think, okay, if I felt uncomfortable with that kind of studying for the sake of studying and for kind of making visible these lives, which is what I claim for my research with working class communities, but I guess politically it means something different to expose the lives of people who are normally invisible. Politically it might mean something different, but I think it was interesting and an interesting challenge for me because I felt uncomfortable with that, but yet it is what I do too. So,
Thank you so much for your contributions today.